Welcome into On Texas Football. Time for the Saturday morning conversation. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by the Rod Babers. This episode of Saturday Morning Conversation brought to you by our friends over at Advanced Pain Care. Dr. Mark Malone. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Rod, I've got I want to take a situation and some time to really flesh out something that you were a part of a couple of weeks ago. You and the guys over at Third and Longhorns, good friends of our program, and you're part of that program as well. Sat down and spoke with Mack Brown for a good hour or so.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had Mack on this show before, and you and I both have a great deal of respect for him and what he did at the University of Texas. There have been times where, things have been going great, then not so good. He's seen it all, right? He's back in Austin now. And I want to take some time, if you don't mind, and kind of get your take on some of the things that he said in that interview, because I think that there are things that can be fleshed out. And I'm gonna start with this. Right. One of the more interesting parts of the conversation, I thought, for you guys was that Mack, when he talked about recruiting and his team, he wasn't just trying to build out a group of players that had the most talent. He was trying to create a team. And you had told me in prior to our getting on here that's where you see some similarities between Mack and Steve Sarkisian. So I wanted to let you give you a little space to talk about that and what he really meant by that and what it means to you personally, since you were part of those teams.
Yeah, it actually kind of surprised me, right? And that's what I love about Mack, right? I have conversations with Mack, annually, get to talk to him, whether interviewing him or just at a function of some kind. And he always surprises me with these kind of great tidbits of wisdom. And he was talking about the Third and Longhorn crew. We were all there. It's very rare that we're all together. Myself and Derek Johnson, Fozzie Whitaker, Jeremy Hills and that crew too, Alex Okafor. Usually we all got different schedules. So, and Nick Shuley, shout out to Nick Shuley, they were all there at the same time. But of course, when Mack was there, we're all there. And one of the things that Mack said was that, I'm not surprised that, all you guys are working together and you guys are good friends. And he brought that, you guys and all play together. I mean, Alex Okafor, I'm the oldest of the crew. I'm the old man. Right? He's like, all you guys didn't play together. Some of y'all did, but y'all all didn't play together. Me and DJ played together, but he said, you guys are all good friends now. He said, that's not a coincidence. He said, it was much more intentional than you realize, because we were recruiting certain personality types. We were recruiting certain character traits. There's certain, data points in your background that we're looking at: family, and looking at how, mama raised them and dad, the work ethic, all those different things. And he said it didn't surprise him at all that guys, different generations of Texas football players are still now drawn together. Not only having the commonality of living in Austin, he said that's a big part of it too, because we knew y'all was going to want to live in Austin. We all knew it. We knew that was part of our pitch too, is that, no, trust me, when you guys leave this school, whenever it happens, you go to the NFL or you just graduate, exhaust your eligibility, you probably don't want to live in this town, because even then they saw its promise and potential. Mack, I remember telling me, I just got to get them to Austin. And Austin does a lot of the work for me, because everybody's surprised how great Austin is. Like, I'm surprised it's such a great town, because people don't really travel to Austin these back then. Now everybody goes to Austin. So that was surprising that Mack said I was recruiting certain character traits. And I think for Sark, the same thing. When we heard Jeff Banks say, and I remember it on LHN before, obviously LHN was discontinued. He said, we're looking for signs. We're looking for signs that are compatible with our culture, signs of respect, signs they love the game, signs that they have great work ethic, right? Signs that they just love to compete. That's why he likes dual sport athletes, that kind of thing. And I think they didn't say it the same way, but they were both looking for signs. These are intrinsic qualities. That obviously the measurables, everybody's looking for those. Guys big, fast, wingspan, all that. But then if that's just a collecting talent. If you want to build a team, you got to start looking at the personality types and looking at the football character. And I think that's what Sark and Mack have in common.
Yeah, it sounds to me like that's a commonality from the standpoint of, look, football's why you're there. It's not necessarily why you stay there, though. What I mean by that, and especially as we look at Sark right now, because Sark's tenure at Texas is drastically different than Mack. I mean, during Mack's time, there was no automatic transfer. There was no portal where you were immediately eligible elsewhere. Mm-hmm. With Sark, a little bit of that has to come into retention, right? If you recruit some of the same types of people that feed off of each other, it helps with retention.
Mm.
And they just don't automatically go in the portal at the first sign of distress. So I think that's a little bit interesting. All right, the next piece I had written down here to ask you about. Mack was never known as a CEO. Or was never known as a X's and O's hyper guy. I mean, he was more of the CEO type.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an interesting element where he talked about how Derek Johnson was specifically a situation where Mack tried to step in. And that is a fine line for Mack and for any head coach is it's your team, but you don't want to micromanage. You want to let your coaches coach.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the story about that and maybe what you learned from that scenario with Mack and with DJ.
Yeah, I remember living it. I never heard it from Mack's point of view because I played with Derek Johnson. We watched Derek Johnson come in as a freshman. I actually hosted DJ on his recruiting visit. And I remember Mack telling me, if you want to win a national title, you better close this deal. All right. Because he's that kind of guy. And Mack was right about it. And I remember when basically he forced his way on the field. And we had a good team at the time with a young Derek Johnson. But I remember when they decided, no, he is going to be getting starting reps now. Like it's time. No matter how young, if he's good enough, he's old enough. Doesn't matter. And I didn't know that. I thought Carl Reese saw what we saw and was like, I got to play this young man because he's so good. And he was that good. Trust me, even in practice and every game rep that he got. But I didn't realize Mack had stepped in. And just for those who don't know, listen, I love Mack, and Mack's he's a Hall of Fame coach, right? He's one of the greatest coaches in college football history. His style was, I'm a delegate. I'm gonna let my coordinators coach. I'm gonna let my assistants coach. I'm gonna hire really good ones. I'm gonna pay them really well, and I'm gonna let them coach. And I'll oversee. And even in practice, he wouldn't. I go to practice and watch Sark. Sark's hands on with them wideouts. Sark's over there. I mean, really hands on. He's a coordinator. He's calling the plays as well as the head coach. So you would understand. But Mack would just kind of oversee. Would take a lot of notes, and he would give everybody his thoughts at the end of practice. You wouldn't hear Mack over there giving one-on-one, coaching during practice. Like he never really did that. But to hear him say that he told Carl Reese in that interview, you need to change the defense. And Carl Reese said, we can't change our entire scheme. And Mack's like, change the scheme. I'm hiring you, change the scheme. The guy's that good. He's that good. He's worth changing the scheme. Most players aren't that good. Most players are not worth you changing your scheme to make sure you can put them on the field. And he's like, no, Derek Johnson is that good. We need to change our scheme because we're a way better defense when he's on the field. So if you don't want to take one of your veterans off the field, well, we need to change the scheme. And we changed the entire defense to get Derek Johnson on the field. I remember when it happened. I in the secondary. I remember thinking to myself, like everybody else, he's got to play. I don't know how you're going to do it, but he's got to play. And good to know that Mack decided to intervene. And one of the few times where he's like, no, this needs to happen. And it was one of those, it's not a conversation. It was not a conversation. It was a strict order from up above, from the hierarchy that Mack said, DJ must play. Now, he was going to play, but it was no, and Mack didn't like to play young players. We all remember the Cedric Benson thing. Mack traditionally didn't like to play young guys, but Derek Johnson left him no choice.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I was just thinking of Derek Johnson, and you saw the season Colin Simmons had last year, 9 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Hill, really, really good football player, and just a kind of a disruptor type. Is Colin Simmons, though, is he the most talented defensive player at a young age at Texas since Derek Johnson? Because I think he is. Like, even as talented as Anthony Hill was, guys like Brian Arakpo played early. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But
That's good.
I feel like Colin Simmons is the most talented young player at Texas. Now, I'm not saying he's going to – I mean, Brian Arakpo, by the time he left, was as good as any of them.
Yeah.
Right? Even as good as Derek Johnson in some ways, right? Different positions. But I think that's the comparison, really.
That's good.
For Colin Simmons is there hasn't been a freshman at Texas as good on defense as Colin Simmons since
And that's a great point. Like, because where you start and where you finish, right? Because he's starting, I'm with you. I don't know if a true freshman has started at this high a level in terms of development. I remember, Caden Stearns is a great example.
Yeah,
Caden Stearns was first team all.
He's great. He's terrific out of
as a true freshman. He was unbelievable, the wolf of DKR. And then he never, that kind of plateaued a little bit. I mean, he still was a good player, played in the league. I mean, it's a good player, but we didn't build on that. We thought, oh man, this guy's going to end up winning the Thorpe if he just gets better every year. And that is the challenge. Because Derek Johnson got better every year. I watched it. And like you said, the Ragpole got better every year. For Colin Simmons, that is the goal. Because you are starting at such a high level. Man, you started 9 sacks. That's why people are saying if he gets better, he's definitely going to get double-digit sacks. So you have to guard against the regression if you're Colin Simmons. And from what I hear, there will be no regression. Like I don't think there's any, because he didn't play that much.
He didn't start a single game.
He didn't play. Guys, I believe he had one game with over 20 pass rush snaps. That was it. He had one, and that was the Arizona State game, if I'm not mistaken. And he wrecked shop in that game. I mean, go look at his stats. It's unbelievable. So he didn't play a lot. And I think that's, to me, why I'm so hopeful, optimistic that he is going to be a game wrecker when now he has to get starter reps there. So that's the challenge. You're right. He's got to get better. But I'm with you. I don't know I think he's starting at a higher level than Derek Johnson did. And that's crazy to say that.
You think even a higher level. So I think it's very similar to.
It's very close. He could, I mean, they're very close, like in terms of just how impactful they were. A true freshman was not supposed to be that impactful. Where they impact the game to that way, to that manner where you have to allocate resources or you have to run away from them, that kind of thing. That's how good Derek Johnson was. He impacted the game instantly. That's how good Colin Simmons is. So that's a great conversation there about
I have a couple more questions for you as it relates to that Mack Brown conversation that we can kind of go off on. But first, here's a couple of guys that also had pretty good time in orange and white for Mack Brown.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced pain care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and advanced pain care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced pain care. The pain stops here.
Up there, every time we see those two guys on the screen together, kind of brings back a lot of wins to me. Austin Advanced Pain Care around Central Texas, 512-244-4272 for next and same day appointments. Hey, Rod, I want to ask you this, going back to your conversation with Mack. Another thing that I thought was interesting is when he first got to Texas, he had a little discussion about that and what he thought he needed to do, who he leaned on, that sort of thing. Take us back through that conversation, some of the things that caught your attention.
Oh yeah, Matt talked. One thing I think that I kind of similar to Sark in that way, because I've said before, after talking to Sark recently, I've been pleasantly surprised how well equipped and prepared he's been for the scope and magnitude of the job. Like
Sark, that is.
Yes, and he's at USC, so USC that's a big job, right? And Washington is, a big time college football program. But the coaches that I've talked to, they all talk about the many hats you have to wear at Texas. Not only as the head coach, but recruiting, and then with the boosters and the donors, and then the fans, the market, marketing the program, that kind of thing. And Mack was just amazing at it, and he learned from really Darryl K. Roy. DKR is who taught Mack really how to address and how to really be able to solve the problems, all the different problems that are presented to you, being the head coach at Texas, and where the problem areas would be. And Mack talked about that a ton. He's always given Coach Royal a lot of credit for giving him really the manual, the cliff notes to the job. A lot of things that a lot of coaches have to learn on the job, Mack didn't necessarily have to, because Darryl K. Royal, was advising him in that moment. And I think that for Mack, he understood, because of DKR and because of his time as a college football player himself, and then coaching. Remember, Mack coached at Oklahoma. He knew how big the job was. And I do think at times, even though you would think, man, that's ridiculous, I think guys like Charlie Strong at times didn't know how big the job was. I think it surprised them the scope of it. Tom Herman should have been prepared for that, and it cost him. He didn't realize the scope of it. He didn't realize the magnitude of the job.
The fishbowl aspect of it is unbelievable.
Yes, yeah, and I just think that when you come in, you realize that no, man, it is like I said, it is a gargantuan task to try to be the CEO of this job. And I'll give Sark a lot of credit. He's a way better CEO than I thought he would be, and that's tougher when you're calling the plays.
Yeah.
It's tougher when you're calling the play, and it's tougher now that you got NIL and transfer portal. Not saying Mack would have been great. Mack would have been great in all those areas, but he didn't have to worry about all those things. So to be a really good CEO in this day and age in college football, while you're also calling the plays, that's a Herculean task. And I applaud Sark because he's been magnificent at it, actually. And we critiqued him here and there, but he's been really damn good as the CEO of the program so far.
Mack, when he first got there, he turned it with recruiting, Rod.
Yeah, he did.
Recruiting and Ricky Williams.
Ricky.
I mean, but my point to this, and this is not unlike what Steve Sarkisian did. Sark really has emphasized recruiting, and we're talking about this one day after John Turntine commits to the University of Texas here on a Saturday morning. That recruiting aspect of Mack and Sark, there are some similarities there too. Did you hear anything from Mack in their success? Did you hear anything from Mack that kind of struck you as a metaphor or some sort of draw to a similarity to what Steve Sarkisian's been able to do?
He was very complimentary of Sark. And he talked about that he'd be available. They haven't needed anything from Mack. So I think the line of communication is open. I think where Sark and Mack really have some commonality to me overall is just their relationships. Relationships matter to Mack. I mean, anybody who's ever met Mack has a story about, oh man, Mack, he gave me, he gave me this time, and he remembered me from when I met him 3-4 years prior to that, and all that kind of thing. Mack really valued relationships, and they actually do matter to him. That's not an act, by the way. They do matter to Mack, and I remember me and Mack had our falling out. Everybody, I'm not gonna go in detail about it, and we have reconciled, and me and Mack have hugged it out, and we're great. But the reason that we had fell out is because I'll just tell you straight up. Mack told me, he's like, "Hey man, you said something I thought was disrespectful to my players, to my players." And he said, I did the same thing for you. He said, matter of fact, I think I did a couple of times. Had to have talks with a couple of members of the media. I don't like what you're saying about, these guys. I don't like the way you're saying it. I think it's disrespectful. I think their parents need to hear that kind of thing. And I totally respected that. It made sense to me. I'm a parent now. It makes perfect sense to me because they're reading this stuff, that kind of thing. I totally get it. And Mack understood I had a job to do, that kind of thing. I had a job to do, and there were people that looked to me for my opinions about Texas football, and I got to keep it real, even when keeping it real goes wrong. And so me and Mack settled it. But the reason was because that relationship really mattered to him. He made sure that after all that went down, that he reached out and we settled it. And Mack, all over. I mean, I remember Mack, he asked me about my mom every time I see him. Every time I see him, he asked me about my mom. And the reason I committed to Texas is because my mom loved her some Mack Brown. Still to this day loves Mack Brown because Mack made her a promise. Mack promised my mom that I would get my degree. I went back to Texas after playing in the NFL, after my brief NFL career. First thing Mack asked me when he sees me, "Are you done playing?" I was like, "I don't know, Mack." He's like, "Well, go down there and get enrolled. I told your mom you'd get your degree." That's it. First thing he said. I told my mom, and she was like, "Oh, I love, God bless, Mack. God bless." Because, it was a promise he made to my mom in 1999 or whatever he was out there. And it mattered to him. First thing he brought up, unsolicited. He was like, "Let's get that degree." So I think that's what Mack, and I've talked to a lot of guys, and I've actually had some interaction with Sark, but I've talked to a lot of the former players, and Sark has now opened up the program again for the former players. It matters to him. He even told the guys at Third and Longhorn when we interviewed him, he said, this platform matters because you guys are former players, and the current players need to see the former players after they're done playing. Whether you have a great career like Derek Johnson, you end up in Hall of Fames, or you have a Rod B-like career, all right, where you play 3-4 years, whatever it is, or you have a career you don't even make it to the league, you can still be successful because of the seeds you planted here as a Texas Longhorn, where you're at Jeremy Hills and you can be training the best athletes in the world, and you can be Fozzie Whitaker now, working with ESPN, and Alex Okafor, who's on the school board, and Pflugerville, and Derek Johnson, who's working with literacy programs to educate the youth. I mean, a number of things, and he said this platform matters because we need to treat former players a certain way, because that's part of our sales pitch now to the current players. Look at these guys. Look at them. And that got me right there, Bobby. That actually hit me because I hadn't heard Sark talk about the former players before. As a former player, it matters because your current players going to be former players. And Mack was big on it being a family. He's like, it's a family. And so when you come back, get your degree. We'll pay for that. Texas owes you that. So this is before NIL and all that. He's like, we owe you that. So we'll pay for that. Even when you're 25, 28, 30 years old, University of Texas will pay for that if you were a student athlete here at the University of Texas. And that's how he took care of the former players. Let's get your degree so you can go out there and start your life and represent the University of Texas well. And I'm starting to hear Sark echo some of those same things because now he's so ingrained in the program. He's starting to see the cycles a little bit. The guys are coming back. He's starting to see the Quandres and Derek and all these guys coming back and going, you know what? It's important the way that we see our former players and the way we treat them, because you guys are going to go through the same cycle.
Yep.
That similarity really struck me because that sounded like Mack to me. It sounded like Mack.
I got to be honest. That's one of the reasons why I love on our channel bringing back so many former players and asking them, "Hey, what are you doing nowadays?"
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a healthy visual of what these young people eventually are going to turn into, exactly. and that sort of thing. From your conversation with Sark, and to separate the Mack Brown conversation now, was there anything that you took away from there that you want to add to this conversation today? Because it doesn't have to necessarily tie into the Mack conversation, but just really, I listened to the Sark convo and I felt an earnestness from him that I think people underappreciate. Like, every coach has cliches they use. I mean, it's coach speak. I mean, you and I both know. And even Sark has some that he repeats. I mean, but there's an earnestness about him that comes across really clean and forthright. Do you agree with that? And maybe anything else you noticed in that, sit down that you guys had with him?
I agree with you. Like an authenticity. And you're feeling for it, right? In the pre-interview process where he's hanging out with us and during the interview and that kind of thing. And even afterwards, this
is a great point, right? Like when you're going to interview, you and I have both been doing this for, you've been in it probably for 20 years now. I've been in it for 30. You meet with somebody and talk about them pre-interview. Yep. And then they become somebody else during the interview. Exactly. Sark's not that way.
He's not.
He's the same guy before and after as he is during.
And that's exactly what I was going to, Bobby. And I kind of gets to one of his coachisms, right? Who you are some of the time is who you are all the time, right? Sark says that a lot. That's kind of the culture of his team. But I agree with you. I've talked to Sark a few times, and this is definitely the most comfortable he was, and I think the most confident he's been, because now he knows his vision. Like, he can actually bring it to realization. He knows it works, right? The methodology they put in with talent acquisition, talent retention, development, the culture, it's working. Now you just gotta. So I think that's where the confidence comes from now. But there is an authenticity to Sark, and I appreciate it. I've said this before on the channel. He's my favorite coach that I've covered at Texas. This includes Mack, because I love me some Mack, to go to their press conferences and media availabilities. I make sure I watch all of them. And I didn't do that with Charlie. I didn't do it with Mack. I didn't do it with Tom Herman. I would hear something from the media and I go back and watch it because it wasn't worth it. There's a lot of coach speak. It's a lot of just random the answers they would give. Sometimes it wouldn't actually even address the question. Yep. They would try to spin Mack was good at that, by the way. I love Mack. Mack was great at just filibustering. I was like, Mack, you didn't answer the question. You took 4-5 minutes and never answered the question. And I don't even know what.
That's why Mack would have been such a good politician, by the way.
Amazing. Yep, totally. Mack would have been elected in Texas if he'd have just. And now you got all these other former coaches trying to get elected. Man, Mack could have went all the way to Capitol Hill. But that's what. But I think Mack did it on purpose. Mack is savvy now. Mack didn't want to answer y'all's questions, the hard ones, so he would take over and filibuster the press conference. And then Tom Herman had the Mensa thing. He thought he was smarter than everybody else in the room, so a lot of his answers, he was trying to go right over people's heads. And I just think Charlie at times he was uncomfortable in that environment. Period. But with Sark, I watch all him because he actually the thought-provoking answers. He tries to answer the question, and he'll give you nuggets as a member of the media. And one of the things I always talk to Sark about ball. I want to talk about ball. I get asking him about other things, but I want to talk about ball. That's why every time I submit questions for Sark, just between me and you, and I've had to do that like twice. They have to cancel. They have to X out a few of my questions because I'm always asking about, hey, I want to know about 21 personnel. Are you going to run it in the second half more? That kind. He's like, oh, no, we're not giving Georgia answers to the questions. No. So he only answered a few of my questions about football. And what I love about Sark, though, is he's a problem solver. And I always say coaches have to be great problem solvers. You have to have solutions for problems, whether it be on the field or off the field. And I think that's what he's been really good at. You look at the things that have really hindered the program from year to year, and he has tried to figure those things out year to year, whether it be culture, whether it be scheme, or whether it be a coaching issue, recruiting. Texas usually, now red zone, I guess, could be one of those. Very few. They don't have recurring systemic issues. Right? It's usually something that pops up year to year. And that's just because every year is its own individual season. And that's what I love about him. And he's a football theorist like myself. He studies football and he tries his best to be on the cutting edge and be as progressive and as modern as possible when constructing his scheme for offense, which we all know he's one of the cutting edge offenses out there, NFL or college. But now I'm seeing him do it with defense as well. And that's what I was really excited about. He's talking about building the defense in a manner that I've talked about for years, in a positionless football, and looking at guys who have that position flexibility. And he's talking about it a lot now. And not only I'm happy that I've been talking about it for like 5 years, and now we're hearing him talk a lot about it, but I love the fact that it shows me he studies the game. He knows where the football is going. He's not.
He doesn't think he knows it all already. He thinks he knows a lot.
He's a student of the game still.
Yeah. I get it. I completely agree. All right, Rod, thank you so much for sharing tidbits from that conversation for both Mack and Steve Sarkisian. I thought folks would enjoy hearing a little bit more color from you since you were behind the scenes of that over at Third and Longhorn. I appreciate you very much. Also appreciate our friend Dr. Mark Malone and the guys over at Advanced Pain Care. Again, 512-244-4272. If you need same day or next day appointments, that's Advanced Pain Care across the Central Texas area, 512-244-4272. All right, Rod, we'll see you again later today. And then the weekend, got a lot of stuff going on this weekend. Texas now at 17 commitments. And before we get going, I want to add one last thing. Prayers go out to our friends out in the Kerrville, Fredericksburg area, Ingram, all that area of Texas, just devastated by floods yesterday. So special prayers go out to that region. For Rod Babers and our producer, Matt Hudson, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good one. Hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em.